NASCAR will officially race in Mexico City in 2025, and it sounds like Zane Smith may not be headed to Front Row Motorsports after all in 2025. What's going, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're first going to take a look at a ton of paint schemes that have been revealed over the course of the last couple days. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into them. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2024 High Point Black scheme that we'll see this weekend at the Southern 500. Scheme looks pretty cool in my opinion. I like the black tint to it. It does look pretty good, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at the Southern 500. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Tyler Reddick's 2024 Upper Deck scheme that we'll see in the Southern 500. I like this a lot. It's going to have Michael Jordan, Wayne Gretzky, and I believe LeBron James or Tiger Woods on it. I think it looks pretty solid. It does look pretty epic and pretty cool to see that Upper Deck will be sponsoring Tyler Reddick this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Ellis's 2024 Southern Elevator scheme that we'll see this weekend at Darlington. I think this looks pretty good in my opinion. I love the colors on it. It's for a good cause as well. It looks pretty great. Definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Timmy Hill's 2024 W scheme that we'll see this weekend in the Southern 500. Scheme looks alright in my opinion. It's very interesting considering this is one of Jake Paul's energy companies, if I remember correctly. It's very interesting for sure. Hopefully he can have a good run in this scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ricky Stenhouse Jr.'s 2024 Kroger Drumstick scheme that we'll see in the Southern 500. The scheme's okay in my opinion. JG's had some good schemes and some not so good schemes. This one's okay. We'll see what he can do this weekend in this paint scheme. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Brendan Poole's 2024 Bill Elliott Throwback scheme that we'll see this weekend in the Xfinity race at Darlington. I love that Alpha Prime is doing all these throwback schemes, and this one looks exceptional. It's a throwback to Bill Elliott's McDonald's Night scheme, if I remember correctly. It's very solid looking, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Darlington. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ross Chastain's 2024 Busch Retro scheme that we'll see this weekend at Darlington. I absolutely love this paint scheme. It looks amazing. I think Trackhouse knocked this out of the park. One of the best Busch schemes I've seen so far this year. It looks incredible, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend in Darlington. It looks fabulous. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Anthony Alfredo's 2024 Beyond Type 1 scheme that we'll see at Atlanta next weekend. This is for a really good cause. Anthony's very excited to drive this car. This is absolutely a phenomenal paint scheme, in my opinion. I think our Motorsports knocked this one out of the park. It looks solid. It looks fabulous. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing on the racetrack next weekend at Atlanta Motor Speedway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Garrett Smithley. As it was announced last night that Garrett Smithley will drive the 45 for Alpha Prime Racing this weekend at Darlington. I believe this will be the second time we've seen Garrett Smithley behind the wheel of the 45 car. Obviously, he was driving for JD Motorsports for pretty much the whole entire season, but obviously that team no longer is racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. They may come back in the future, but at this moment, they're not racing at the time. Garrett, I think, is a solid race car driver. He does bring a little bit of funding with him. They're doing a throwback to Bill Seifer for this as well, which I think is pretty solid and pretty awesome to see. It's pretty cool Garrett is running now. I believe that there are some guys that are going home. I think we've got a pretty stacked field for the weekend, so I think this car does have to qualify in on owner's points. We'll see what Garrett Smithley can do. It's a great opportunity for Garrett. We'll see what he can do this weekend with Alpha Prime Racing at Darlington Raceway. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kevin Harvick. As it was announced on Monday late afternoon that Kevin Harvick will be running the Cars Tour race at Florence this Friday evening with Rackley War Racing. He'll be there along with drivers like Dale Jr., Landon Lewis, I believe Carson Quaffle, maybe Lane Riggs if I remember correctly, and many other drivers that compete full-time in the Cars Late Model Tour. Kevin has said he's planning next to run around 14 to 15 races. He hasn't said if he's going to be coming back to NASCAR at this point, but I think it's pretty exciting to see that Kevin is going to be running some more late model races in the future, and it's good to see he's coming back because he said he doesn't want to give it up altogether, and I think it's great that he is going to get the chance and opportunity to run with Rackley. It's very interesting. He's now running for his own organization. There probably wasn't a car available for him to run with KHI, so it's pretty awesome and exciting to see, though, that Kevin Harvick will be running the Cars Tour race at Florence this weekend. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, this is not the first story surrounding Kyle Busch we're talking about, but this is about the Adelaide 500. Now, I believe Speed Cafe put this tweet out on Sunday evening. I was not able to cover this, but we know Kyle Busch is not planning to run the Adelaide 500 at the end of this year. And basically, Peter Adelton, I believe, who owns Mobile X, which, of course, some of these other companies like T-Mobile or AT&T and all that stuff, which I think the Australian company for that, he basically revealed what the scheme could have looked like had Kyle Busch run. The scheme looks absolutely phenomenal, in my opinion. It is very unfortunate to see that Kyle Busch is not running the Adelaide 500, but I'm also not really shocked and surprised. They were very close to announcing. I think some of those team announcements a couple weeks ago were for Kyle Busch to run that event. Obviously, it sadly fell through, so Kyle Busch is not running the Adelaide 500. It's unknown at this point if maybe someone else be taking over. Maybe, for instance, Kyle Larson, who I know SVG had kind of mentioned that Kyle Larson was interested in maybe running the event. So maybe Kyle Larson takes over and runs it. But it sounds like right now we're not exactly sure who is going to be running this car if it does end up happening. Nonetheless, it is very sad to see that Kyle Busch will not be running the Adelaide 500 later this year. Maybe in the future he does it, but as right now he will not be running this year's Adelaide 500. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Greg Van Alst. As it was announced late Monday evening that Greg Van Alst will drive a 07 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend at Darlington. This will be the second start that Greg Van Alst has had so far this year, as he did race in the Xfinity race at the Brickyard weekend when he ran his Super Speedway package. He also made select starts in the NASCAR Xfinity Series last year, I believe. He did make some select starts, I think, for Alpha Prime Racing, but unfortunately ended up struggling. Now, Greg Van Alst, I think he is a talented race car driver, but let's be real and honest. In the races he's ran in the NASCAR Xfinity Series or the Truck Series, it has been a big struggle, unfortunately. So I really hope he can run well, but SS Greenlight Racing, let's be real and honest too, it's not the best equipment out there. So I hope he can prove me wrong and do a great job this week and maybe get a top 30. It is a treacherous track and can be very difficult to pass, so we'll see what he ends up doing. I think this car is in a really good position at owner's points, so he should not have trouble in making the field. That being said, I hope he can do a really good job and have a strong run this weekend at Darlington with the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Cory Heim. As it was announced Monday afternoon that Cory Heim will drive the 26 for Sam Hunt Racing this weekend at Darlington. This will be the first of 3 scheduled starts he has remaining with Sam Hunt Racing for 2024. As of course, he has been rumored to maybe go full-time with this team at points. But Cory Heim has made select starts so far in the NASCAR Xfinity Series for Sam Hunt Racing. And I think he's done a pretty good job with this organization so far this year. And Cory almost won at Darlington in the Truck Series 2 years ago in his NASCAR Truck Series debut nonetheless. And I think Cory has a lot of potential. And I really think that he is going to come in there with Sam Hunt Racing, which has had some great runs with Cory. He's qualified very well. I think realistically, Cory Heim could have an outside chance and opportunity to get his first career NASCAR Xfinity Series victory this weekend at Darlington. I can mention there is a chance he could eventually be full-time in the Xfinity Series with a team like Sam Hunt Racing, but right now I think the main focus is to run really well this weekend with them, see what he can do. I think it'd be great for Cory to run up front this weekend. Hope he can have a very solid, and a great run this weekend with Sam Hunt. I think he'll be very competitive, and I do think he will for sure be fast this weekend at Darlington. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Franco Canopino. As it was announced yesterday afternoon that Logan Sargent will not finish the rest of the Formula One season for 2024. The driver who will replace him for the remainder of the year is Franco Canopino. Now, look, no one is shocked and surprised to see that Logan Sargent is getting replaced the remainder of the year. I like Logan a lot, but let's be real and honest. Logan Sargent has been completely struggling in Formula One this year. We already knew that Logan would not be back with this organization for 2025, as Carlos Sainz will be replacing him going into next year. That being said, they replace him with the guy 6th in the standings in Formula 2, who also has not had a practice session, I believe, in Formula 1, does not have enough super license points to move up next year. And this guy, you're telling me, is your replacement. Why are you bringing in a guy, and I know he's part of Williams, but why are you bringing in a guy that is clearly not ready for Formula 1? Why couldn't you get Liam Lawson, who you guys were rumored to be talking to, or someone like, I don't know, Kimi Antonelli, who's heavily rumored to be going full-time with Mercedes next year. Why not get one of those guys to get the chance and opportunity? I just feel like it's a really ass-backwards decision, in my opinion, to put someone in there who, in my opinion, is clearly not ready to go to Formula One. I could be wrong, and he does very well, but I think that Franco's going to crash a lot and do not much better than Logan. I don't think he's ready to move up, and he would not have been my choice to move up to this team. I think they should have gone with someone who has more experience, drivers who have practice sessions. I think it would have made a lot more sense to put Kimi Antonelli in this car. But again, I've seen Williams do some dumb things in the past, so it's not a shock and surprise. As for Logan Sargent, I do think he will be coming over to IndyCar or sports cars, but I'm not sure if he's going to be a superstar in those series either. So I really hope he can do a great job, but let's be real honest, I'm not sure if he's going to come in and do a fantastic job once he does, in fact, come over to NASCAR eventually. Not NASCAR, but another series like sports cars or IndyCar. And now we're going ahead, jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the playoff format. Now, Chase Elliott was asked the questions surrounding the playoff format and Harrison Burton winning, and was asked about should Harrison Burton, with this win at Daytona, despite the fact he's 34th in the points, should he be eligible to be in the playoffs? Well, Chase Elliott basically said that it says it's unfair to judge Harrison Burton's win and say he should be in or not in the playoffs because NASCAR is the one who does this playoff format. And Denny Hamlin also agreed with him in the comments below when Bob Pockers put that up. I understand where Chase Elliott is coming from, and he is absolutely right. Harrison Burton is in the playoffs because of this format. NASCAR has this winning or in system, regardless of where you're at in the standings. If you're competing full-time, if you get a win, you're able to get into the playoffs. That being said, and I'm very frustrated with this as well, I think this is a rule that absolutely needs to change going into 2025. I think you can be very, very happy that Harrison Burton picked up the win. It's a feel-good story, a driver who will not be back with this organization in 2025, and obviously a driver who struggled, and a team that hasn't won in 7 years. It's great to see the Wood Brothers, one of the most historic organizations in NASCAR history, go out there and win. But at the same time, you can also be frustrated and upset that a driver sitting as far back in the points as Harrison Burton is in. They used to have a top 30 rule a few years ago. Had that happened, Harrison Burton would not have made the playoffs. You had some legitimacy. I feel like there's no reason a driver who's 34th in the standings should be able to make the playoffs. I'm sorry, there's no reason Harrison Burton, who's had 6 top 20s all year long, who's been the worst statistical full-time driver this season, there's no reason he should be able to make the playoffs. I hope they change this. I think it should be a top 25 rule if we're going to have the winning or in. But I think overall the winning or in system should just go away. I think it should be top 16 in the standings, or if you wanted to cut it down to 10 or 12 drivers to make it a lot more interesting. So I think the playoff run would be a lot better because he took it from drivers who should be able to make the playoffs, in my opinion. So I know some wanted to add my thoughts on that, and personally, I think that basically that NASCAR does need to change the playoff format going forward, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, after the NASCAR Cup Series race at Daytona, Bubba Wallace was interviewed by multiple media members after the race, and Bubba, you could tell, was very frustrated about the outcome of the event. He basically said that I've been up front competing for wins at times this year, and I've not been able to get the deal done. He says it's pretty much unacceptable at this point. Now, he did go on to Dale Jr. Dallin and kind of talk about this, and he kind of was a lot more calm in this situation, and he basically went on to say that he knows what he's got to do going to Darlington pretty much, and he's confident that he can run pretty well. I think that's what he kind of said in his interview. Now, Bubba, a lot of people were going off at him saying, well, his teammate has won a ton this year. His teammates won 2 races, and yes, Tyler Reddick, we all know, is a much better driver than Bubba Wallace. But unfortunately, because of Harrison Burton's win, Bubba Wallace, more than likely, unless he wins at Darlington, he's not going to make the playoffs this year. And you can't really blame Bubba for that. There's guys like Ross Chastain and Chris Buescher also on that area, and both they're 2 drivers who've had times had chances and opportunities to compete for wins so far this year as well. Bubba Wallace has had 5 top 5s and 11 top 10s. He is on track to have a career year in almost every statistic. Maybe outside of lap sled, though, he might get a chance to do that and wins as well, which I think he will win before the end of this year. He has to win this weekend at Darlington unless Chris Buescher or someone in front of him struggles like Martin Truex Jr., and I don't think that's going to happen. So at this point now, he's just going to have to fight his way to get a win. And I just don't agree with how the system is, and I feel like Bubba should be in the playoffs right now because he deserves to be in it of how well he has been performing. So I really hope in the future, like I've already mentioned, that NASCAR does change the playoff format going forward, but I'm glad that Bubba is kind of down to earth in this situation and is focusing on trying to get a win, which I think ultimately at this point, I think he wants to go out there and do it. I think he wants to go out there and win a race at this point and try to make the playoffs. Maybe he does win Darlington. He's been pretty solid there, but he does have to hope people in front of him do end up struggling. Again, like go back to the Harrison story, I really hope NASCAR does go ahead and change the playoff format for 2025. I hope they really do it. Hopefully that does end up happening. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Lee Diffie. As there was reported by Adam Stern late Sunday evening that Lee Diffie said last week that he was preparing for his move to NBC's NASCAR booth by watching tape of races chronologically called from the start of the season. He also said he's worked before with Steve Letarte and Jeff Burton, obviously the Rolex 24 coverage. Also when he did work with NBC's NASCAR coverage back in 2017 as well, when Rick Allen, I believe, is covering track and field events back then. You could definitely tell that he studied coming into this. Lee Diffie absolutely killed it. This is no disrespect to Rick Allen. I think Rick Allen is a very solid commentator. But in one race that Lee Diffie called, he outperformed Rick Allen. That last lap call, seeing Jeff Burton in the booth jump up for joy, seeing his kid go out there and win, and him saying, "Jeff, your boy has done it." It was one of the most iconic calls we've seen. The last lap was incredible. And you could tell the Lee Diffie, he just shows professionalism. He brings the energy to the booth. And now, in my opinion, was one of the best broadcasts I have seen for NASCAR on NBC ever, and one of the best broadcasts I've seen in a very long time. And also, the lack of full-screen commercials was really great to see. None, as a matter of fact. They had side-by-side, but you didn't miss a moment in the green flag action, which was just overall amazing to see. So I think that he knocked it out of the park. He did an absolute amazing and fantastic job overall. And I think it was really amazing and great to see Lee Diffie just absolutely kill it. He's a fantastic lead commentator, in my opinion. He just shows professionalism, and I think it's great that he's there for the remainder of this year. I think he's going to do a great job calling the championship throughout the year, and I also think that he should be back next year. If they're thinking about bringing him back, they do need to bring him back for 2025. I really hope they do end up doing it for next year, that he's able to come back. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Milwaukee Mile. As it was reported by Jay Ski and multiple other reporters in the industry that the Milwaukee Mile will not be back on the NASCAR Truck Series schedule in 2025 and also will not return for the ARCA Series in 2025. They've listed a couple reasons why they will not be back on the schedule for 2025. Number one, they couldn't find a new day for the event to happen. They basically, with the IndyCar race going to the day that they basically originally were the Truck Series and the ARCA Series were scheduled, moving it around there, they were not able to schedule a NASCAR date there, an ARCA date there as well. The other reason is because of attendance. If you looked at the attendance, and I think it was cool they brought Milwaukee back, don't get me wrong, but if you look at the attendance for this event, nobody showed up. It was like a ghost town. And I think a big problem is the lack of promotion for this event. A lot of people did not even know they were racing in Milwaukee this weekend. A lot of people, of course, knew you were racing at Daytona, but a lot of people did not know that they were racing in Milwaukee because, one, the Craftsman Truck Series does not have a ton of promotion. And number two, one thing is they didn't show any of the practice or qualifying sessions on TV. I think had some people in that area been able to see it on TV, I think you do get a few ticket sales for people to show up. But at the same time, if people don't know what's going on and there's no promotion for the event, of course no one's going to show up. It makes sense. No one's going to show up to an event if you're not going to promote it overall. So I'm not surprised by this, sadly. I think it is disappointing overall to see that Milwaukee is not coming back on the schedule. But like I said, I'm not really shocked and surprised considering they weren't promoting it. And again, like I've already said, you've got to promote stuff for it to grow. And if you don't promote it, it's not going to be successful. So I really hope going forward, if we do have events like this, you got to promote it, which we'll get to Rockingham here in just a second. But I really think going forward, there's got to be better promotion from some of these racetracks so people can come. You've got to promote it because you can't just say people will come. You've got to promote the product to the people so they can show up to the tracks, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about a 24/7 channel. As it was reported by Jonathan Howard from On3 Sports that NASCAR appears to be building a 24/7 channel called the NASCAR channel, which is called Fast, which is currently hiring people at this moment. And NASCAR did confirm that some of those hirings are happening at this particular moment. I didn't really get a good chance to read the article, but it sounds like this is going to be coming from that new NASCAR production facility that NASCAR has been working on and building up, which probably is going to be some people working in that studio to call races for the future, unfortunately. But a 24/7 TV channel. I saw this, and I think that this is overall something that NASCAR has needed for a very long time. Not only is it likely going to be a cable channel that NASCAR is going to run, but it's also likely going to have a streaming platform as well. I would imagine that NASCAR Classics will be on there, NASCAR's app that they've been using to get all the legendary races, and probably be able to find a way to upload more races over a given time on there. Maybe also get the Xfinity Series and Truck Series, have their full races as well. Again, it's unknown how long it's going to take for something like this to get done. But I saw a lot of people suggesting people in the YouTube industry get a chance and opportunity. No one suggested me, which I would be cool if I got to have a chance and opportunity to work in that facility. But I think having a streaming facility like this, a 24/7 channel, which used to be kind of like the Speed channel, by the way, for NASCAR coverage, I think is something NASCAR truly needs. Formula One has this. NBA has this. I think the NFL has a 24/7 service, especially on cable. And I think if you can find a way to incorporate this into NASCAR's coverage overall, I think it's going to be a huge dub and a huge win overall for everybody. So I really hope NASCAR can get this done so people can go out and check this out. I think that's the big thing. I think they need something like this for NASCAR to grow, in my opinion. And I do really hope and pray that NASCAR continues to get this done. Obviously, like I said, it's unknown when they are going to officially end up finishing and get this done. But I really hope to get it done very, very soon. So because I think that there's a lot of good people in this industry who need jobs. I really hope NASCAR can get it done in the not-so-distant future so we can see a true 24/7 NASCAR channel. I really hope it does end up getting done very, very soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Coke Zero Sugar 400 TV ratings / viewers. As it was reported by Jay Ski and NASCAR and NBC's PR that the Coke Zero Sugar 400 averaged 3.6 million viewers. That is up 6% from 2023, which had 3.26 million viewers. It's also the most watched Coke Zero Sugar 400 since 2021. That is absolutely huge. And according to the report as well, from the 10:45 to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time area, they basically peaked at 4.3 to 4.4 million viewers. That is really incredible to see the numbers up. The most watched Coke Zero Sugar 400 since 2021. Now, granted, the 2022 edition was rained out and was put, I think, on another network, if I remember correctly, in 2022. I think it got moved to CNBC, if I remember correctly, which originally was going to go to USA, but they had some stuff they were doing on the network, so they couldn't go there. And then, of course, in 2023, it was on Saturday, and people were not as interested in the event. But I think it's amazing to see the TV ratings did go up for this year. I think a big reason that played a role into that is, one, the racing was absolutely incredible. I think it was some of the best racing we've seen on super speedways all year long. But number two is basically the fact that this race had no full screen commercials. I think this experiment worked for NBC, and I think going forward, they should not have any full screen commercials for not just super speedway tracks like Atlanta next week and Talladega, but I really hope when it comes to next year on TV, like with Amazon side of things or TNT side of things, I really hope they see these numbers and they're like, an increased number, especially of fans, and they're like, yeah, let's go ahead and have no full screen commercials. No other sport has full screen commercials when the action is going on. Maybe outside of IndyCar very slightly, but mostly they have side by side. I think that with NASCAR especially, you need to find a way to get the sponsorship for TV, but you also need to find a way for the fans to be able to see it. And I think that if you have full screen commercials, it's going to turn people away from watching, unfortunately. So I think they absolutely made the right decision to do the no full screen commercials for the event at Daytona. And I really hope going forward to some of the other events, they decide not to have full screen commercials because I think they absolutely nailed it and killed it to not have those, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about SRX. As it was reported by Adam Stern and the SRX as well, that the SRX is suing the Skip Barber Racing School for multiple different reasons. According to what they basically released in their press release, they said it was supposed to be private and they were not supposed to reveal any information that they had acquired the SRX. Well, according to them, they have not acquired the SRX and they're still waiting on payments that they have not received. This is absolutely wild. Obviously, the SRX has not been around at all. It was supposed to run this year in 2024, but the car count was unfortunately down for the 2024 season, and they were supposed to go over to the Skip Barber Racing School and race over there this year, but obviously we now know it's not true that the Skip Barber Racing School has acquired it. Obviously, Tony Stewart had no longer had any interest in running the SRX. Don Hawk also revealed in a statement as well in the quote sheet from Adam Stern's tweet. He basically went on to say that he no longer is working at the Skip Barber Racing School, hopping between multiple different areas. We don't know what Don is doing in the future. He worked at Spire Motorsports for many years, and now he's obviously going over and was working with the SRX to try to build that up. Obviously, this situation is very unfortunate. Again, I really would love to see the SRX come back at this point. I think the racing was entertaining, but if they were going to bring this series back, they also need to bring some sort of innovation in there and go back to having more of the old school drivers racing and not the drivers who are modern. Because last couple years, you had drivers like Kyle Busch winning and Denny Hamlin winning. And you also had Hailie Deegan, who, again, she's not completely a superstar, even though she's popular on YouTube. She's not the biggest superstar, in my opinion. So I think that for the SRX situation, it's kind of a sad situation, all things considered, because I think we all wanted to see the SRX continue this year, but like I've already kind of mentioned and said, it is not continuing for 2024, and I don't know if it's ever going to come back at this point. The fact they're going into court, the fact they're having lawsuits for this situation at the moment, it is definitely very unfortunate and kind of a tragic situation overall to see that the situation for the SRX is kind of going down like this. I don't think anybody wanted to happen this way for the SRX to really go down like this, right? Where now they're in lawsuits and having the situation go forward. Again, it's unknown at this point how much money they'll receive. I guarantee they will receive some of the payments that they're owed by the Skip Barber Racing School, but don't reveal information if you are not allowed to reveal that information. I think that's a big thing that they basically screwed up on, and I can't blame them for being upset and frustrated about that. But at the same token, same time, you guys kind of put them in that position because you guys weren't making the move to get this series continued going. At this point, I don't know what the future for the SRX is. I think the SRX, unfortunately, is going to be done at this point, and I really don't see the SRX continuing going forward in the future. I want to see it continue going forward, trust me, but at the same token, same time, I think the future for the SRX is very uncertain, in my honest opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Austin Dillon. As it was officially confirmed on Monday early to late afternoon that Austin Dillon's final appeal has officially been denied by Milwaukee, and the win from Richmond will not count towards the playoffs for this year. This means that Austin Dillon will have to go to this weekend's race at Darlington, which, to be fair, he's had some good runs at Darlington in the past. But Austin Dillon will have to go to Darlington this weekend and try to go out there and win the event. Now, remember, Austin Dillon had made a very aggressive move at Richmond, where he basically went and dumped two drivers coming to the checkered flag. Now, before that caution had come out with Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Ryan Preece, however, Austin Dillon was cruising to victory and was easily going to go out there and win the event. But Austin Dillon, on the final restart, he drove half a second up and dumped Joey Logano, and then he came back down the racetrack and right-reared Denny Hamlin down the straightaway. NASCAR then basically said they were going to make a decision, and they basically revoked Austin Dillon's playoff eligibility. Then they went to the original appeals panel. They actually reduced the spotter suspension from 3 races down to 1 race, but they basically still lost 25 owner and driver points, and also their playoff eligibility was gone. And then the appeal panel basically went to the final appeal, and they were denied it. Look, Bill Moles basically said that he broke the rules. Quintessentially, the S&T data proved and everything else. There was no way that RCR was going to win their appeal. There was really no shot they were going to get it done. It was basically a major waste of time by Richard Childress Racing to do this. I get why they did it, because they thought they were going to make the playoffs with that win, but let's be real and honest, they weren't going to make the playoffs this year. There was no way they were going to make it with the move they ended up making. And I think NASCAR and everyone on that appeals panel, including Bill Moles, made absolutely the right decision here. And I think it's a great decision to deny it. it just shows, it does at least in this situation show that NASCAR does have some credibility and integrity in this area. Now that being said, and Steve Phelps mentioned this talking to Kevin Harvick, he did say that they're hoping to go forward in the future, that maybe they're going to have some in-race penalties for situations like this. If something like this happens again, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Well, it could happen because history does repeat itself. But if something like this does happen in the future again, NASCAR needs to be able to have the rights and the guts to penalize in the race. I think if they do that, I think the fans would be a lot happier. So I really hope NASCAR is looking at this situation going forward, and they're like, hey, let's go ahead and do in-race penalties, and let's not just sit around and screw around here. Let's get this done within the first 5 to 10 minutes so we're not continuing to have these situations go on throughout the week. Because you could have the conversation through the week. We shouldn't have taken 2.5 weeks at this point, because Richmond, by the way, was August 11th. Today is August 28th. It was August 26th they got all this done. It took 15 days to get everything done. No reason it should have taken this long, in my opinion, for everything to get done. I really hope going forward that NASCAR can work to make decisions speed up a lot quicker, and they can get everything done going forward in the future, so situations like this don't continue happening going forward in the future, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now we're going to talk about the Mexico City race in just a little bit near the end of the episode, but a lot of people have been asking Bob Pockers about this because at the time it was rumored and not officially announced, but a lot of people have been asking is, will Kyle Busch be able to be good to race in Mexico? Well, it was officially confirmed yesterday from Bob Pockers and Ben Kenny, everybody else, that they think Kyle Busch is officially going to be good to go to race in Mexico and will not need a playoff eligibility waiver to basically sit out for the event. Obviously, Kyle Busch, we all talked about the story in the beginning of last year, but Kyle Busch was arrested for having a loaded handgun, if I remember correctly, that he brought to Mexico. He had to pay a bunch of pesos. It sounds like he did pay that fine over time, which again, it was a lot of pesos, which pesos compared to money in the U.S. isn't as much, but it would have been really wild to see Kyle Busch not be able to race in Mexico. But I'm glad to see that they've cleared up this situation and this misunderstanding. And Kyle Busch, of course, has sent those payments so that he can race in Mexico next year. And I think that Kyle Busch, because he is a former winner at the track, he won it in 2008 back then. And I think Kyle Busch, depending on, because RCR's road course program compared to other programs, especially with the speed they've shown recently, they're building a lot of momentum. And there's been rumors of a merger coming between RCR and Kaulig Racing, where I think both those groups combining in some sense and working together much closer, I think that they're both going to gel very, very well together. And I think Kyle Busch having now the opportunity to go and compete in Mexico, I think is absolutely very huge and really great for the sport overall. So again, I'm really glad to see they figured the situation out overall, and it sounds like overall things are looking great for Kyle Busch in this situation where he'll be able to go out and race next year in Mexico. And I think he, like I said, will be very, very competitive. I think he'll have a great chance and opportunity to win. Had he not been eligible to run, I would have to imagine maybe they get someone from a different scene like a Pat O'Ward, though Pat O'Ward, of course, will be, of course, competing in the IndyCar event at Worldwide Technology Raceway during that weekend, so it won't end up happening because it's during Father's Day weekend when this race is happening. So overall, it's great to see that this situation, though, has been cleared up, and it's great to see that Kyle Busch will get the chance and opportunity to race in Mexico. Glad the situation has been resolved and has been cleared up, and good to see that Kyle Busch will officially be racing in Mexico City in 2025 and for the next couple years as well in the Mexico City area. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Rockingham Speedway. As Bob Pockers put out a tweet indicating that the NASCAR Cup schedule and the schedules for all three series will likely be coming tomorrow potentially. And one thing that he mentioned was Rockingham Speedway. And Adam Stern quoted this as well, where basically was mentioned that Rockingham Speedway will likely be on Easter weekend in 2025 for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series, and ARCA in 2025. There have been a lot of chatter and a lot of rumors and a lot of rumblings over the last couple weeks / months that Rockingham Speedway was hoping to get back on the NASCAR schedule for 2025. The last time the NASCAR Xfinity Series raced at Rockingham was back in 2004. Jay McMurray won, I believe, in the number 30 car for Todd Braun's organization back then. And the last time the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series raced there was back in 2013 when Kyle Larson picked up his first career NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series win, which is his first win in all of the three big series. I think this absolutely is huge and exciting Now, obviously, the NASCAR Cup Series will not be racing there, and maybe in the future, Bob had mentioned this, maybe in the future there is a chance that the Cup Series could go to Rockingham Speedway, but it sounds like they're not going to be doing that for 2025. This means, according to what the rumor schedule will look like, it sounds like there's going to be no off weeks at all for all series combined. There's going to be 38 straight weeks of racing, which I think for some people is going to be tiring. For some others, it's not going to be tiring. But it's also tracked really close, especially for these Xfinity teams, right? They're going to be able to save a lot of money, especially, and they're not going to have to travel as much out like the West Coast, especially. And I think going to Rockingham is going to be a very, very fun event for a lot of fans. And I think Rockingham is going to put on a really excellent show. The Truck Series, when they race there, put on some really excellent, fun, and exciting shows at that track. And the NASCAR Xfinity Series always put on great racing there as well. And I think tire conservation, which is something a lot of these drivers haven't learned over the years, especially the younger drivers, I think is something that drivers are going to have to learn. I know they repaved it recently, but they've had tire issues with Hoosier especially. So I think you're going to have tires come into play. And you might get a similar situation to Bristol where you're going to have to manage your tires very, very well. Again, we don't know when the schedule is officially announced. Like I mentioned, it does sound like it is coming potentially very, very soon, maybe as early as this week. But I think it is very exciting that Rockingham is going to be on the schedule. I've always been a big fan of Rockingham. It is a great track overall, and I think it's a great facility. And I think what they've done to Rockingham, the upgrades they've done as of recently, I think are phenomenal, and I think they are absolutely incredible. And nonetheless, I think it's an amazing story overall, and great to see that it sounds like Rockingham Speedway will officially be on the NASCAR Xfinity and the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series schedules for 2025. Very awesome stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the 2025 NASCAR schedule once again. As there was reported by Chris Myers, who works at Fox Sports, that he kind of revealed the early portion of what the 2025 NASCAR schedule could look like. He says the Daytona 500 will likely be once again the first race for 2025. Then he says that Atlanta will be the second race of the year. Then after that, it looks like Circuit of the Americas will move from late March to the early end of March for 2025, meaning we'll have a road course for the third race of the year. Then we're going to race at Phoenix. Then we'll race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And then we'll race at Homestead Miami Speedway. There is expected to be a schedule release for 2025, potentially as early as tomorrow. Some indicated it could be early afternoon. And we're starting to get more inklings of what the 2025 schedule is going to end up looking like. Obviously, Daytona 500 being the first race and points paying race of the year, not a major shock and surprise there. Obviously, Atlanta being the second race, no major shock there. I think it was a very successful event the first time around. We had that fantastic and great finish. One of the closest finish is in NASCAR Cup Series history, one of the greatest races ever. It was just overall a fantastic race. COTA moving to the third race of the year. There's been rumors that this race is going to be moving to early March in the past. I think having it a little bit early in the year is very interesting. I think the weather is not that bad in early March, so fans overall, I think, will have a much better experience, and I think fans be able to be prepared as well. And also, it's kind of part of that West Coast swing area, considering Texas is kind of closer to the West Coast swing. And then you got Phoenix to Las Vegas as the fourth and fifth races. That makes a lot of sense overall. And then Homestead Miami Speedway, we obviously know there's been rumblings and rumors that track was going to be moving to early in the year in March. It sounds like that will likely end up happening. I think they wanted a warm climate race, but my theory is that they're wanting some time to get the season finale prepared for 2026. As we know, Homestead is heavily pushing to have the season finale for 2026, as Phoenix will host the season finale for 2025. Overall, we sound, like I mentioned, it sounds like a schedule is close to being announced. Here's some things we do know. The playoff schedule. It sounds like Darlington to 7500 is going to open up. Then Gateway is moving into the playoffs for next year as second race of the round of 16. And then, of course, we know Bristol will be the final race of the round of 16 next year. Then the round of 12 opens up in New Hampshire. Then we go to Kansas, and then we go to the Roval. Round of 8, it sounds like it's going to be Las Vegas. The Talladega is part of the round of 8, which I entirely don't agree with at this point. And then the final race will be at Martinsville. And then the final race of the year will be at Phoenix. Again, not a big fan of it, but Phoenix being the season finale, not a major shock and surprise. Atlanta is going to be on June 28th as the first race of that side of Amazon, I think, or Prime. And then, of course, we had no at this point that the Coke 600 will open up the Amazon season. We have been hearing, of course, rumors that Iowa's moving to early August. We also been hearing rumors, of course, that Dover might be moving to around my mom's birthday next year. So it sounds like there's some big changes coming to the 2025 schedule. And it sounds like I've already said, that the schedule is coming relatively and very, very soon. I'm very intrigued to see what other changes are coming, not just for the Cup side of things, but for the Xfinity side of things as well. We'll see what else ends up getting announced, but it sounds like there's some pretty big and awesome changes coming. I hope the schedule's good. Hopefully we do get to see some great and exciting racing for 2025. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about San Diego and other street cities. As it was reported by Adam Stern late Sunday evening that NASCAR has had conversations with San Diego about hosting a NASCAR Cup Series street race during that weekend in the San Diego area. In addition to that, they said that they've had conversations and have spoken to entities from cities including Cincinnati, Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and some from the Pacific Northwest, including Seattle and including Portland as well. They also did mention Denver potentially as another area that they have had discussions with about hosting a street race for the near future. Now, we are expecting that Chicago Street Course will be back for 2025. They did put a teaser video out very recently for what people have been saying. So it sounds like we are going to be racing once again at Chicago for 2025. But 2025 is the last year of the current contract. Beginning with San Diego, that would be very, very interesting to have a street circuit at, maybe around Petco Park, where, of course, San Diego Padres play, and, of course, you have other teams that play in that area as well. That could be a very interesting move where we could race in an area like San Diego. It's part of one of the biggest markets in the United States, and I think San Diego, while it's not the biggest city in the California area, San Diego is one of the largest cities there, so it would definitely make a lot of sense to have a race in the San Diego area. And I think having that California market, while not big as like the North Carolina market, I think having race in California, which does have a lot of fans, would attract a lot of very major interest. And then you look at the other cities that are mentioned, right? You, of course, have Cincinnati, Baltimore, and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh, we know NASCAR has had talks, and we know Pittsburgh is very interested in hosting a street race. Pittsburgh, obviously, is a city that really, really wants it. Pittsburgh is a growing city right now, and I think fans would absolutely love to have a race going across that bridge in Pittsburgh, right? I think it would be very fun to go across that tunnel as well. I think we'd be in for some pretty exciting and really great racing there. Cincinnati, a lot of people are kind of talking about. It sounds like that could be the next area we do end up going to as well. I saw a break car put up a sketch, and because he's from that area, he kind of put up a sketch showing that. I think you look at Cincinnati, I think it would be pretty epic and great to see that a race in that Cincinnati area where the racing would be very, very fun in the area especially. And I think having it like around the Reds or the Bengals Stadium would be pretty cool to race there. And then, of course, Baltimore. IndyCar used to race there many years ago, for about 10 years ago. As a matter of fact, they raced there. I think Baltimore would be great. And then you think about Portland and Seattle, too. Seattle, I think, is the headquarters for Amazon, if I remember correctly. So that would make a lot of sense to go up and race there. I think you are going to see more street races happening. I think because NASCAR has seen a lot of success from the Chicago Street Course, I think you are going to see more street races in other areas in the future. And I think overall the racing could be very, very fun. If you want my prediction, the most likely next area we do go to street circuit after that, I know San Diego's been mentioned, but I think it's going to be Pittsburgh. I think the fact that Pittsburgh's been mentioned multiple different times, and plus there's not as many races kind of on that East Coast area, I think NASCAR has a big East Coast-based viewership, and I think you need to find a way to incorporate that for those fans up in that area. So I think in 2025, we're going to be racing in not 25 because we're racing in Chicago, but I think for 2026, we do go racing in Pittsburgh. I think having another street circuit race would be great. I think there only should be one every year in my opinion, but I think having a race in that San Diego area or area like Pittsburgh especially, I think it'd be really, really great for everybody overall. So I really hope they do end up having this happen, and I really hope we do get to race in an area like San Diego, race across the country, different areas. I think it'd be phenomenal, and I think absolutely would be really great to see. I hope we do get a chance and opportunity to race in different areas of the country like San Diego, Pittsburgh, and Baltimore, maybe in the not-so-distant future. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Zane Smith. Now, we know that Zane Smith will not be returning to Trackhouse Racing / Spire Motorsports for 2025 as Trackhouse amicably split with Zane Smith after the end of this year. As, of course, we know that Trackhouse will be expanding to a 3-car operation for 2025. As, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen will move up full-time to the NASCAR Cup Series for the year. It made a lot of sense at the time. SVG's had 3 NASCAR Xfinity wins so far this year, and let's be real, I think SVG is going to give you a better chance and opportunity to win a race than a driver like Zane Smith. I think Zane's very talented, but I think Shane overall is a pretty good driver. Now, we all had kind of thought that Zane Smith was potentially going to head over to a team like Front Row Motorsports for 2025. However, Kevin Harvick did mention on his Happy Hour podcast about 45 minutes in that he had also thought that Zane was going to be going to the 34 car for Front Row Motorsports for 2025. And we all had kind of been hearing this too. But it sounds like, according to Kevin Harvick, it sounds like Zane Smith may not be joining Front Row Motorsports in 2025 after all. Now, why could Zane Smith not be joining Front Row Motorsports? Well, Zane Smith had been under Ford contract before, but of course he left Ford at the end of last year to start driving for Spire Motorsports / Trackhouse Racing for 2025. Now keep this in mind, Front Row were the ones that made the decision to let Zane go at the end of last year when they brought Michael McDowell back for 2024 and Todd Gillen back for 2024, which both drivers have panned out pretty good. Todd is sitting in the top 20 in the regular season standings, and Michael McDowell, I believe, is sitting 21st or 22nd in the standings currently at the moment. Ford has had a very big history where they have been very, very petty. And look, Zane has had a lot of success at Front Row. He won the Truck Series Championship 2 years ago with them. It would make a lot of sense for them to bring him in. But you have to remember, Front Row now is a Tier 1 Ford organization. So I think Ford is going to have a lot more decisions on what they want to say. That being said, I think if Ford blocks Zane Smith, it is going to be one of the dumbest decisions I think Ford has made. And it's another bad decision they've made when it comes to driver talent. You go back to 2020. Tony Stewart has said this, that he really was pushing to get Kyle Larson to drive for his own organization for 2021. Guess who denied that opportunity? Ford. They were trying to pick up Kyle Busch when Kyle Busch was part of the sweepstakes. They were on to teams like 2311 who were interested. And of course, other teams like Trackhouse that have been interested. And SHR was the team that had been mentioned as a possibility. Guess who denied that opportunity? Ford. Ford denied that opportunity. And now it sounds like, according to Kevin Harvick, they're apparently pissed off at him and they apparently want to teach Zane Smith a lesson. I think this is a bad look overall for Ford, if they don't pick up Zane Smith. You guys don't have a driver development program. Let's keep that in mind. You guys don't have a driver development program. And your drivers, yes, sure, you've got Sheldon Creed and Sam Mayer, who are both very talented race car drivers, but they also are bringing a paycheck over to Haas factory team. So they're drivers that are already bringing a paycheck. So they're not fully part of Ford. You guys have worked with Zane for many, many years to build him up. For the last few years especially. Because he didn't want to stick around and drive in another year in trucks, which last year the Truck Series was a complete shit show, by the way. It was a complete embarrassment. You're telling me that you guys are that upset with Zane? I don't understand that, in my opinion. Zane is someone who has a lot of potential, and he's a little bit older as well. You need to bring someone in there that's a little older who I feel like could really help Front Row grow. That being said, if they don't move Zane Smith into the seat, who gets it at this point? Chandler Smith's been mentioned as a possibility, and there's rumors that Chandler Smith may not be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing and Xfinity in 2025. But Chandler Smith is not a better driver than Zane Smith, in my opinion. And again, I like Chandler a lot. But Chandler has only had 2 wins in the Xfinity Series so far this year, and guess what? Both of them have come at flatter short tracks. And yeah, we have a lot of flatter ovals in NASCAR, but I don't think that Chandler Smith is going to set the world on fire with a team like Front Row, in my opinion. And then there's other drivers on the market. Harrison Burton could be someone that goes there because he could stay in Cup, but I've been hearing he might be going to AM Racing. But if somehow they put him behind the wheel, I don't really like that. I know someone probably mentioned Hailie Deegan, but Hailie Deegan, there's no way she's going to be going over there. Sounds like she could be headed over IndyCar, Indy Lights potentially. There's been rumors about that. You've also got other drivers like Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece could be an interesting option to go to Front Row. But other than that, I don't know at this point. The big thing for me is what happens with Zane. Where does he go? Maybe he stays with Spire after all and goes to the 7. If Justin Haley stays with the 51 car, that could definitely be an option. I think Zane working Ronnie Childs would be a really, really great move. At this point, then you, of course, got Rick Ware. You've got RFK. RFK is rumored to be expanding potentially for 2025. I don't know at this point. But what happens the rest of the silly season? We know, of course, SVG is going full-time. Kyle Busch is expected to return to Rich Choice Racing at this point. We know Alex Bowman, he's back with his organization. Bubba Wallace is expected to stay with 2311. Maybe Denny Hamlin picks up Zane Smith instead of Riley Herbst. I think that'd be a really great move into Toyota. Basically teach Ford a lesson for screwing around. At this point, Ford needs more development. They don't have a lot of talent right now, in my opinion. They don't have the biggest talent pool. Your talent in development is Haley Deegan and Frankie Muniz, and Haley may not be in NASCAR next year. So I think overall it's just a bad look on Ford's end, and I think they're making overall a very bad and dumb decision, in my honest opinion, when it comes to Zane Smith. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Mexico City. As after months and months of waiting and speculation, it has finally been confirmed that NASCAR will officially be racing in Mexico City in 2025. This will be the first time the NASCAR Cup Series has raced outside of the United States since 1958 when they raced at Toronto, which I believe Richard Petty went on to go and get that victory. It will take place on the June 14th to 15th weekend. The NASCAR Cup, Xfinity Series, and Mexico Series will all race during that weekend as well, meaning that the NASCAR Xfinity Series, of course, will be on the CW for the event, and this also means that this will be one of the Amazon Prime races for 2025. This is absolutely a huge and massive day for NASCAR, and not only that, I think it is a huge job for NASCAR overall to go to Mexico City. Mexico City is not just one of the biggest cities in the North America area, but it's also one of the biggest cities in the world. 18 million people live in Mexico City. There's only about 4 or 5 cities, I believe, that have a bigger population right now than Mexico City. On top of that as well, there is a massive fan base from Mexico that are huge fans of NASCAR. They have a huge presence. While not as big of a city like Canada, for example, Mexico has a massive presence. They have a NASCAR Mexico Series for crying out loud. So going back to the schedule, we do know that the track layout is likely going to look like. They're not going to be using the full F1 layout, it sounds like. According to Jenna Fryer, it sounds like they're going to be taking out turns 5 and turn number 6 for the event. So instead of being like a 17-turn track, it'll likely be a 14-turn track. It sounds like they're going to be using the stadium section as well with the layout, which I don't entirely agree with that move. I think they should be doing the Parabolica. I don't think the Cup cars are going to do a great job getting through there. I expect there to be some pretty big wrecks there. I think the NASCAR Xfinity Series race is going to be an absolute banger. I think that's going to be an amazing event. The Xfinity Series always puts on amazing products at road courses, and I think you have to look at a guy like Connor Zillage. But I do think a lot of Cup Series drivers are probably going to go run that Xfinity race. I expect Kyle Larson to run it. I think you'll see Chase Elliott potentially run that race. I think Shane Van Gisbergen will run that race for sure. I'd have to imagine there'll be some other guys coming in as well from Cup, like a Kyle Busch perhaps, like someone like a Ross Chastain perhaps, like a Chris Rebel, like a Denny Hamlin. And I think you're also going to see some of these Cup guys who need the experience on road courses go and run the NASCAR Mexico race as well. I do believe it's going to happen. I think Daniel Suarez for sure, even though he's had a lot of experience at his track, when he did race in the Mexico Series, I'd have to imagine he's going to go race there as well. But I think this is an absolute win for NASCAR. We know NASCAR has been absolutely going and pushing to get a race internationally for the last few years. They came very close to having an international race for the NASCAR Cup Series for this season. They have been talking to Montreal to race there for this year, but obviously at the last minute, that unfortunately fell through, and NASCAR is not racing in Canada. Now, Bob did mention, and someone had asked about, had NASCAR had conversations with Montreal? He said yes. NASCAR was getting close to talking to Montreal about having a race for this year, and it certainly could happen in 2026, but it doesn't sound like currently at the moment it will be happening for the 2026 season, or 25 season for sure, which is very, very unfortunate. I think having international presence is really huge. Every sport is doing this right now. Every sport is expanding globally. You've got an NFL game that I believe is happening this week, as a matter of fact, that's going to be taking place, I believe, in Sao Paulo, if I remember correctly. You've got the MLB that's expanding their games outside of the country. You've got other sports that are expanding, like golf. Of course, you have Formula One, who continues to expand their presence in the United States, who's been rumored to have a race in Chicago in the past. We obviously know that NASCAR is looking to expand globally. And I also want to give a huge shout out to Ben Kennedy. Ben Kennedy's a big reason for a lot of these major schedule changes. We've had a lot of old school tracks come back. We, of course, brought Iowa back in recent years. We, of course, brought North Wilkes back for the All-Star race and eventually a points-paying race, probably. We brought Bowman Gray back for the Clash next year and also likely brought Rockingham back as well. But then they're doing new school events. The Chicago Street Course, potential racing in San Diego and Pittsburgh. You've also, of course, got the LA Coliseum race they ran. And then, of course, you also now have the Mexico City race. Now, the Xfinity Series did race there back from 2005 to 2008. Mark Truex Jr. won there in 2005. Denny Hamlin won there in 2006. Juan Montoya won there in 2007. And then 2008, Kyle Busch won. If you're looking at the drivers who are going to be favorites, I'm not going to have any of those guys as favorites. I think the favorite has to be SVG to win the Cup race, right? Shane is an amazing road course racer. He adapts to tracks very, very quickly. I think he'll be great. I think Kyle Busch will be fast probably because RCR's road course program has been pretty good in the past. I think that a lot of these drivers will be very fast and very competitive. But I think this is a huge dub and a huge win for the sport overall. And I think the racing itself, I think, will be very phenomenal. And I just am so excited about this. I think international presence is very, very huge. I know some will disagree, but it's going to be less travel than going to Los Angeles. But you're going to have to get your passports ready and get them approved when we go down there. A lot of people that have been going against this event, we've seen a lot of reporters come out and defend this event, which I think overall is absolutely huge, that a lot of people are defending this event overall. And again, I think this is a huge win for the economy of Mexico, and I think for the tourism of Mexico, because Mexico City is a very tourist-friendly area. I think having a race in Mexico City is amazing and absolutely huge. And you think about other international moves. We know NASCAR is interested in going to Sao Paulo for the Clash for 2026, and we also know they're interested in going to other tracks across the world. We've talked about maybe them going maybe to the UK, maybe going somewhere like Canada in the future, maybe going somewhere like, I don't know, China at this point, or Japan. We used to race in Japan back in the day. I think it'd be really amazing to see NASCAR, and I think it's great to see overall that they continue to expand their international presence. I'm excited for this race in Mexico City, and I think we'll see some pretty phenomenal and great racing when we do eventually go to Mexico City in 2025. I'm so excited, and I'm looking forward to this event overall going into next year. So, that is going to be today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's episode. How excited are you to see the NASCAR's racing in Mexico City? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Zane Smith, and do you think he'll join Front Row or not because of Ford? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we're going to have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for Darlington. Tomorrow, we're going to have the Southern 500 race picks. We'll have the paint scheme video for the event, and we're also going to have the schedule release video likely coming tomorrow as well. Friday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video discussing news over the course of the last couple days. Then Saturday and Sunday, we'll have a lot of great content dropping. We do have a Shane Van Gisbergen video dropping on Saturday after the race concludes at Darlington. And we'll have a lot of great content dropping on the channel over the course of the next couple weeks as we get closer to the playoffs as well. Most likely, potentially Monday, you might, of course, see the playoff predictions for 2025 as well. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.